There was a deep silence in the lounge. Around the large wooden platform, the men of the family were seated. In front sat Mrs. Sakina, and beside her, Here was sobbing uncontrollably with hiccups. The corners of her eyes had turned red, and helplessness was written all over her face, the kind that falls to the share of a child deprived of her parents. Mrs. Sakina's hand rested constantly on Here's head. She was trying to console her at every moment, but the stream of tears refused to stop. Mr. Salim, the eldest of the family, and the one whose word was final, drew in a deep breath and spoke. Now is not the time to show sympathy. A firm decision has to be made. Otherwise, we will sit here the whole day and the entire night. It is not my habit to prolong matters with needless arguments. Sakina, my daughter, we know you love your niece with all your heart. She is just as dear to us as our own daughters. But the reality is that she cannot live in this house alone any longer. You are a married woman. You have daughters of your own. And in such circumstances, this girl is not safe in your home. A solution must be found. Either marry her to Sikandar or suggest another way. Since Sikandar is willing to take her in marriage, I don't think we should delay any further. It is better that, as soon as possible, we free ourselves of this responsibility so that when we die, we can answer her father that we fulfilled our duty toward his daughter. Mrs. Sakina's face instantly turned crimson. She sat up straight, tears still in her eyes, and cried out in anguish. Uncle, what are you saying? Do you even realize what kind of words you are speaking? You are also the father of daughters, the grandfather of granddaughters. How can you say such a thing? But Mr. Salim quickly interrupted. Sakina, what harm is there in this? Very few people step forward in such times to stand by someone. Otherwise, people don't take a step without demanding dowry. Sikandar has shown his generosity. Without asking for dowry, without making any demands, he wants to take her as his wife. He wants to take full responsibility for her. So what harm is there in this? Before he could say more, Mrs. Sakina interrupted. No, please stop, Uncle. Have some consideration? What you are saying does not sound right at all. Don't you realize the weight of your words? How could you even think of such a thing? Sikandar is 40 years old, already once married. And Mahir is only 20. How could you possibly imagine marrying her off to a 40-year-old man? This is the age for her to dream about her life, not to be bound this way. And her family is still alive. Her uncle and her aunt will decide what is to be done with her. Mr. Salim, now in a stern tone, replied, Sakina, this decision was not made lightly. You don't need to be emotional. You belong to another household now. And as for Usman, I don't see her uncle anywhere around. He spoke sarcastically. Mrs. Sakina clenched her fists tightly but remained silent. Mr. Salim continued, When we were on our way, Usman clearly said he would never step foot in this house again as long as she lives here. He will never accept his brother's daughter. He does not even wish to see her face. And you talk about family? What family, when I don't see any family around me? Hearing these words, Heer's heart pounded as if it would break through her ribs. She began biting her lip in grief, tears dropping into her lap and her hands trembling. Wiping her tears, Mrs. Sakina spoke. But uncle, this is no solution. Throwing a young girl into someone's marriage like this is not justice. What about her future? Her education? Her happiness? Mr. Salim raised his hand to signal silence and said, Daughter, family honor comes before everything. We cannot leave an orphan girl wandering free. Our family's name stands the highest. Your father was a very honorable man. If his granddaughter were to fall into some scandal, what would we do then? For the first time, Heer spoke up in a trembling voice. I am not wandering free. I am with my aunts. They are like a mother to me. Why do you want to hand me over to a stranger? I will not marry. Her heart was aching. After losing her father, she had never imagined she would be crushed under such mountains of hardship. All eyes turned toward her. For a moment, the room fell into silence. Mrs. Sakina immediately grabbed her hand and said, My child will never be handed over to a stranger. That is my promise. Those words still echoed in the air when suddenly Mr. Sahil, Mrs. Sakina's husband, spoke up. If you won't give us her custody, then fine. We're ready. Let's have her married to Sikandar. I support this. These words struck Heer like lightning. She looked at her uncle in disbelief. Her eyes were filled with grief. The word uncle slipped from her lips uncontrollably. Mrs. Sakina stared at her husband in shock, as if his words had pierced her heart. She could not believe that at the final moment, Mr. Sahil would say something so absurd. It was because of her husband's support that she had dared to speak in such a large council, and now her own husband was abandoning her. It broke her heart completely. Hearing Mr. Sahil's words, Mr. Salim spoke. Now, if your husband— But before he could finish his sentence, Mrs. Sakina burst out. Watch yourself, uncle. Don't you dare even think of such a thing. I will never allow my niece to marry Sikandar. We all know what happened with his first wife. He killed her. That truth is still alive in all our memories. And look at his age. He's 40 years old, while my niece is only 20. How is that justice? I will never let her marry Sikandar at any cost. Her stern tone silenced the entire room. She was known as a wise and soft-spoken woman, but today it was about her daughter like here, and she refused to bend at any cost. She stepped forward and added, "And as far as outsiders are concerned, listen well. I will call my son Yasim right now. In this very council, he will marry my niece here. Then none of you will have any objection about whether this girl is in my custody or not, but I will never let her marry Sikandar. My niece is unmarried, and he is a man who has already been married before." Her voice thundered through the room, breaking the silence. Faces turned with astonishment and confusion. Some exchanged glances, others whispered under their breath. Before anyone could respond, Mr. Sahil straightened in his chair and snapped in a sharp tone. "Be quiet, Sakina. There's no need to make my son a sacrificial goat. You know he's a captain. He has a name, a position. I will never burden him with such a responsibility. Don't even think about ruining his life by marrying him to an uneducated girl. I will bring a daughter-in-law from a high family, an honorable family. And Mr. Salim is absolutely right. What dowry will your niece bring? We may have everything, but women always bring dowry. And your niece has nothing left. Even this house is rented." Here's heart was pounding hard, her hands trembling. Hearing Jasim's name, she froze with fear. The very thought of marriage made her limbs shiver. When Mrs. Sakina heard her husband's words, her patience shattered. She shouted in anger, "Sahil, if you dare stop my son, then hear me well. I will break all ties with you. You can sit alone with your son, but I will never leave my niece in such a state. And as for dowry, God has blessed me with plenty. I desire nothing from anyone." The veins on Mr. Sahil's forehead swelled, and his voice grew louder. "Do whatever you want, but my son will never marry her. That is my command." In front of the entire council, he let go of his wife's hand, unaware. That destiny itself had written another, judgment. Here's heart felt stuck in her throat. She could never have imagined that the decisions of her fate would be made so openly. The atmosphere was about to get even more tense when suddenly, from behind, a deep yet strong voice echoed, "But Father, I want this marriage. I have no objection to it." Everyone in the room turned in shock. At the doorway, standing tall in a black shalwar kameez, was Jasim Khanzada, now the center of everyone's attention. Confidence was etched on his face, and determination sparkled in his eyes. For a moment, it felt as if the air itself had stopped. Here wiped her tears with trembling hands and looked at Yasim in disbelief. Her lips quivered, but she couldn't speak. Light filled Mrs. Sakina's eyes. She knew her son's words would turn the direction of the council. What her husband had failed to give her, her son had. Mr. Sahil's face was a mix of anger and astonishment. He stood up and shouted, "Do you even know what you're saying, Jasim? Is this sympathy for here, or just stubbornness? Don't you realize that after this decision, people will point fingers at your career, at your reputation?" "I will not allow this." But Yasim replied in a firm voice, "Father, I don't care what people will say. I'm a soldier. I have the courage to lay down my life. So I must also have the courage to protect my family's honor." Mrs. Sakina stood tall beside her son. Her eyes glistened with both pride and tears. In a trembling voice, she said, "My son will do it. He will never break my honor. And you, Mr. Sahil, you will just stand and watch." She was overwhelmed with emotion, because she had always considered Heer as her own daughter. All eyes were now fixed on Yasim. He took a deep breath, stepped forward, respectfully held his mother's hand and bowed. Then he went to the platform and sat down, his eyes locked on Uncle Salim. "Grandfather, arrange for the qazi. Let's perform the marriage. I have to return to my unit the day after tomorrow. I won't get leave again for 3 months. It's better we get the marriage done now. I won't leave here alone like this." Hearing these words, Mr. Sahil's blood boiled. He angrily shoved his chair back and roared, "Jasim, keep your mouth shut. There will be no marriage here. If it happens, you will find no one worse than me." His mind was spinning. He was desperate to stop the marriage at any cost. But his wife and son were not listening to him at all, and that only fueled his rage. Heer's heartbeat raced. She couldn't understand what was happening. Mrs. Sakina's whole being trembled with fear. fear that Jasim might give in to his father's command and back out. But this time the matter was different, unknown to everyone. Jasim calmly looked at his father and said, "Father, please cool down. I swear to you, I will not let my mother's honor break. She has never once asked me for anything in my entire life. She has never made a single request. I have always fulfilled your wishes. You said, 'Jasim, you must become a soldier.' I obeyed you. You said, 'Jasim, you must buy your own home.' I did it. You chose my college and university, and I went where you sent me. I fulfilled every command of yours, but my mother has never asked me for anything. And today, in this very council, she has taken my name with pride. I will not break her honor. And Father, I will not break yours either. We'll talk later. But for now, this marriage will happen. I cannot step back. Today it's about my mother's dignity, her pride, and her word. I will not let that break." A strange light shone in Yasim's eyes, as though he had already made his final decision. Everyone in the courtyard looked at one another. A trembling smile appeared on Mrs. Sakina's lips. She wiped her tears with one hand and placed the other lovingly on her son's head. Today he had truly raised her honor. Mr. Salim took a deep breath and muttered, "Fine. If this is the will of both mother and son, then let's call the Qazi. My job was to decide. If Heer's family wants this, then we won't marry her to Sikandar. Instead, Heer will marry Jasim Khanzada right here, right now. That will be the best decision." Heer's heart leapt into her throat. She looked at Jasim with her pounding heart. He sat firmly on the platform, filled with confidence, showing no hesitation, no weakness. Mr. Sahil sat back down, anger still etched across his face. Grinding his teeth, he said only this, "Jasim, you've broken my heart. Today, you chose to give importance to your mother. The fragments of a father's heart lay, shattered." Jasim lowered his gaze and said softly, "Baba, you'll understand later. For now, let what's happening happen. For God's sake, just this once be a part of this wedding. For me." Once again, silence fell over the gathering. The lanterns flickered, sometimes dim, sometimes bright. All eyes were now fixed on the marriage, about to take place. A marriage decided by a son, in honor of his mother's dignity. Time moved slowly. In just a short while, all the arrangements for the wedding were completed. The local imam was called from the mosque, and a few family members stood as witnesses. Meanwhile, Sikandar stormed out in anger. The dim lantern light and the hushed whispers wrapped the courtyard in an odd, suffocating stillness. Heer sat pressed close to Mrs. Sakina, her face streaked with tears, her eyes cast downward. Mrs. Sakina rested her hand on Heer's shoulder, as though transferring her strength to her. On the other side, Mr. Sahil sat beside Jasim, his presence like a statue of anger and grief. His face carried the expression of a man whose heart had been pierced. He wished to stand up and leave, but out of love for his son, he sat there silently burning inside. Everyone knew Mr. Sahil was not happy with this marriage, but what could he do? He was powerless before his son's resolve. The imam's deep voice filled the air with the words of the marriage ceremony. "Heer Suleiman, your marriage is being solemnized with Jasim Khanzada, son of Sahil Khanzada. Do you accept this marriage?" Every eye turned to Heer. She lifted her trembling lashes and glanced at her aunt, Mrs. Sakina, whose eyes held both motherly affection and encouragement. With a soft nod, she whispered, "Say yes, daughter." Heer lowered her tearful gaze and replied quietly, "I accept." Fear coursed through her being. The very name of Jasim had always made her shrink back, and now she was about to become his wife. The thought alone overwhelmed her with dread. The women seated in the courtyard held their breath as the imam repeated the question. "Heer Suleiman, do you accept this marriage?" This time her voice broke, and tears streamed down her face as she sobbed, "I accept." When the third question was asked, Heer's mind conjured the image of her father's face, the strong face that today had fallen into defeat. That sight broke her heart even more, and through trembling lips she whispered, "I accept." The contract was signed, and the imam turned to Jasim. Sitting straight on the dais, his eyes were filled with firm seriousness, his face betraying not a single trace of doubt. Every girl present looked at him with longing, for he had been the family's crush. But today he was marrying a girl no one else had wanted. "Jasim Khanzada, son of Sahil Khanzada, do you accept Heer Suleiman as your wife?" Lifting his head, Yasim answered with unwavering confidence, "I accept." The imam asked a second time. His reply was just as firm, "I accept." When the question came a third time, his voice carried the same strength, I accept. It was as though his words filled every corner of the gathering with stillness. There was no hesitation in his tone. Moments later, the imam completed the paperwork. Had the witnesses sign and announced in a loud voice, "The marriage has been solemnized." At this declaration, the courtyard filled with subdued congratulations. The women offered prayers of gratitude. Some looked at Heer with tender smiles. Mrs. Sakina kissed her niece's forehead with tearful eyes. What she had wanted, she had achieved. She had saved her niece from being cast away, and now her conscience was at peace. She could face her late brother, knowing she had protected his daughter's honor. Mr. Sahil sat in silence, his face etched with both anger and defeat. He kept looking at his son but said nothing. Jassim, meanwhile, quietly managed everything, his firm tone and decisive stand astonishing everyone present. Heer's heart still raced, but all she could hear was one sound echoing in her ears. I accept. That sound had now become her reality. After the ceremony, the guests slowly began to leave. Everyone knew that Heer would now go to the Khanzada mansion. By around 10 p.m., after seeing off the last of the guests, they headed straight there. The vast courtyard of the Khanzada mansion felt even more desolate in the silence of the night. The tall walls were lit by dim yellow bulbs, their glow bouncing off the old trees and spilling onto the ground. Beyond the heavy main gate, the mansion lay in a deep hush, as though it too was mourning. After the wedding, Heer came to the mansion with Mrs. Sakina, though she hadn't officially departed. From her own home, she was now seated in a guest room. The room was spacious, with large curtains drawn slightly open, letting the weight of the darkness creep in. Sitting on the edge of the bed here, tears streamed endlessly from Heer's eyes. She couldn't understand what had suddenly happened to her. Her father's death from a sudden heart attack had shattered her world. Every moment tore her apart with memories of her Baba. He had always stood as her shield, taking every sorrow upon himself. Without him, she now felt like an orphaned bird, lost and abandoned. The silence of the room only deepened the weight on her heart. Just then, the door slowly creaked open. Mrs. Sakina entered, holding a glass of milk in her hand. Her eyes carried the grief and exhaustion of the sleepless night. The moment Heer saw her, the fragile barrier of her restraint collapsed. Sobbing, she threw herself into her aunt's arms. Her voice trembled, broken. "Fufo, what has happened to me? Where did my Baba go?" She had always been his dearest. For the smallest things, she would run to Mrs. Sakina, sharing every sorrow, every joy, pouring her heart out as if with a best friend. And Mrs. Sakina, too, would always share her burdens as if they were her own. But this grief was equal. For Mrs. Sakina, it was the loss of a brother. For Heer, the loss of a father. Neither could ease the other's pain. Setting the milk aside, Mrs. Sakina quickly held Heer close to her chest and whispered gently, "My child, please, have courage. What can I say? Even I don't know how to make sense of this. Life has suddenly thrown you into such a great trial. Something I never imagined." Pressed against her aunt's chest, Heer wept harder. Through hiccuping sobs, she cried, "The moment my Baba died, everyone lined up to become my father. But I don't need anyone. I only need my Baba. Fufo, please bring him back. I can't live without him. I'll die. I have no home anymore. Everyone will call me unwanted, abandoned. I have no one left. Fufo, why did this happen to me? I never wronged anyone. Then why did my Baba have to die?" Mrs. Sakina stroked her hair, trying to hide the tears in her own eyes. "My dear, this is the time for courage. Look, you haven't come into a stranger's home. This is your own home, your aunt's home. I'm here with you. Don't be afraid. Why are you crying so much? I will handle everything. For you, I even quarreled with your uncle. I convinced. Jassim, I stood in the middle of the entire council for your sake. That's no small thing. You are not abandoned. I am your guardian. And now Jassim is your guardian too. So why trouble your heart with such thoughts? And why trouble me?" Heer lifted her tear-stained face. Her eyes were lost, full of fear. "Fufo, my heart feels so restless. I'm afraid of him. Why did you marry me to him? Don't you know? He scolds me over the smallest things. Do you remember? Once, just because my scarf slipped slightly off my head, he scolded me so harshly. He didn't even realize how much I cried that day. Fufo, why did you bring him into my life?" Mrs. Sakina sighed deeply and answered softly. "Yes, he has a temper, I admit that. But besides that, he is a good man. He will take care of you. Look at what he's already done. For me, he stood against his own father. In front of the entire council, he silenced everyone. That's no small matter. He will never harm you. And I think He even likes you. Then why make yourself miserable? And why make me restless with your fears?" In a trembling voice, Here whispered, "Fufo, but I'm scared. What if one day he too gets angry with me? What will become of me then?" "You're mistaken if you think he loves me. He only gets angry at me." Mrs. Sakina wiped her tears and said with affection, "My child, he himself promised that he would never scold you again. You just need time. That's why I didn't allow your departure yet. Until your heart feels lighter, until you are mentally prepared, no one will force you. And anyway, Yasim is leaving for 3 months. Only when he returns will your departure take place. Until then, you are here, with me, safe in my care." Weary and broken, Here replied, "Fufo, I've become so weak." Mrs. Sakina pulled her even closer and said warmly, "This time will pass, Here. Just be strong. Your father wanted his daughter to be brave, to stand on her own feet. You cannot fall apart. You must gather strength and face every hardship with a smile, so that your father may find peace in the hereafter." So his soul is not restless. The room filled with silence. Only Here's muffled sobs and Mrs. Sakina's soothing voice echoed within it. Outside, the courtyard trees rustled in the night breeze, as if time itself bore witness to this moment of pain and comfort. Quietly, Here lowered her head. Her eyes still brimmed with tears, but in her heart, her aunt's words had planted a faint seed of solace. She realized, at least she was not alone. At least someone stood by her. For a while longer, they sat together, speaking softly. Then Mrs. Sakina stood and reminded her gently, "Now rest. I'll go check on your uncle. Who knows how far his temper has flared." With that, she left. Here lay down in silence, time dragging slowly. An hour later, a servant came with a message. "Mr. Jasim is calling you to the porch." She wanted to refuse, but fear kept her from saying no. Forced, she stepped out of her room and walked to the porch. Beneath the stillness of night, the Khanzada mansion's courtyard seemed steeped in an unspoken dread. The moonlight spread faintly across the porch, casting eerie shadows of the trees on the ground. Here stood frozen, her steps trembling. Her hands shook. Her heartbeat pounded so loudly it felt as if her breath would stop any moment. She kept telling herself it would just be for a moment. But her fear only grew heavier. Suddenly, a deep, commanding voice broke the silence. "How are you, Begum? Is your room fine, or should I have it changed? If you have any problem, be sure to tell your husband. Every one of your troubles is mine to command." Startled, she spun around, and there stood Jasim. His stern gaze bore into her, his eyes filled with anger, defiance, and a strange unease. Here instantly lowered her head, clutching her scarf tightly. "The room is fine. You called me. Was there something you needed?" Her voice shook, betraying her fear. She couldn't figure out how to face him. Jasim pulled out a cigarette from his pocket, then put it back. Slowly, he smiled, but it was a smile that chilled her to the bone. "The wedding is done. A long drive is due, isn't it? Come on, get in the car. I need to talk to you." The ground seemed to slip from beneath Here's feet. Trembling, she whispered, "I'm not feeling well. Maybe another time." Fufo doesn't know either. "Whatever you need to say, we can talk in the morning." Her face had gone pale with terror. Jasim's expression darkened instantly, his voice rising with authority. "Did you hear me? Or should I lift you and throw you into the car? Get in, now. Don't dare show me any kind of drama." Here's fear grew unbearable. Without another word, she rushed and sat inside the car. On the seat, she curled up tightly, as if trying to shrink into herself. Tears streamed endlessly from Here's eyes. She couldn't understand what had suddenly happened to her. Her father's death from a sudden heart attack had shattered her world. Every moment tore her apart with memories of her Baba. He had always stood as her shield, taking every sorrow upon himself. Without him, she now felt like an orphaned bird, lost and abandoned. The silence of the room only deepened the weight on her heart. Just then, the door slowly creaked open. Mrs. Sakina entered, holding a glass of milk in her hand. Her eyes carried the grief and exhaustion of the sleepless night. The moment Here saw her, the fragile barrier of her restraint collapsed. Sobbing, she threw herself into her aunt's arms. Her voice trembled, broken. "Fufo, what has happened to me? Where did my Baba go?" She had always been his dearest. For the smallest things, she would run to Mrs. Sakina, sharing every sorrow, every joy, pouring her heart out as if with a best friend. And Mrs. Sakina, too, would always share her burdens as if they were her own. But this grief was equal. For Mrs. Sakina, it was the loss of a brother. For here, the loss of a father. Neither could ease the other's pain. Setting the milk aside, Mrs. Sakina quickly held Here close to her chest and whispered gently, "My child, please, have courage." What can I say? Even I don't know how to make sense of this. Life has suddenly thrown you into such a great trial. Something I never imagined. Pressed against her aunt's chest, Here wept harder. Through hiccuping sobs, she cried, "The moment my Baba died, everyone lined up to become my father. But I don't need anyone. I only need my Baba. Fufo, please bring him back. I can't live without him. I'll die. I have no home anymore. Everyone will call me unwanted, abandoned. I have no one left. Fufo, why did this happen to me? I never wronged anyone. Then why did my Baba have to die?" Mrs. Sakina stroked her hair, trying to hide the tears in her own eyes. "My dear, this is the time for courage. Look, you haven't come into a stranger's home. This is your own home, your aunt's home. I'm here with you. Don't be afraid. Why are you crying so much? I will handle everything. For you, I even quarreled with your uncle. I convinced. Jassim, I stood in the middle of the entire council for your sake. That's no small thing. You are not abandoned. I am your guardian. And now Jassim is your guardian too. So why trouble your heart with such thoughts? And why trouble me?" Here lifted her tear-stained face. Her eyes were lost, full of fear. "Fufo, my heart feels so restless. I'm afraid of him. Why did you marry me to him? Don't you know? He scolds me over the smallest things. Do you remember? Once, just because my scarf slipped slightly off my head, he scolded me so harshly. He didn't even realize how much I cried that day. Fufo, why did you bring him into my life?" Mrs. Sakina sighed deeply and answered softly. "Yes, he has a temper, I admit that. But besides that, he is a good man. He will take care of you. Look at what he's already done. For me, he stood against his own father. In front of the entire council, he silenced everyone. That's no small matter. He will never harm you. And I think he even likes you. Then why make yourself miserable? And why make me restless with your fears?" In a trembling voice, Here whispered, "Fufo, but I'm scared. What if one day he too gets angry with me? What will become of me then? You're mistaken if you think he loves me. He only gets angry at me." Mrs. Sakina wiped her tears and said with affection, "My child, he himself promised that he would never scold you again. You just need time. That's why I didn't allow your departure yet. Until your heart feels lighter, until you are mentally prepared, no one will force you. And anyway, Jassim is leaving for 3 months. Only when he returns will your departure take place. Until then, you are here, with me, safe in my care." Weary and broken, Here replied, "Fufo, I've become so weak." Mrs. Sakina pulled her even closer and said warmly, "This time will pass, Here. Just be strong. Your father wanted his daughter to be brave, to stand on her own feet. You cannot fall apart. You must gather strength and face every hardship with a smile, so that your father may find peace in the hereafter. So his soul is not restless." The room filled with silence. Only Here's muffled sobs and Mrs. Sakina's soothing voice echoed within it. Outside, the courtyard trees rustled in the night breeze, as if time itself bore witness to this moment of pain and comfort. Quietly, Here lowered her head. Her eyes still brimmed with tears, but in her heart, her aunt's words had planted a faint seed of solace. She realized, at least she was not alone. At least someone stood by her. For a while longer, they sat together, speaking softly. Then Mrs. Sakina stood and reminded her gently, "Now rest. I'll go check on your uncle. Who knows how far his temper has flared." With that, she left. Here lay down in silence, time dragging slowly. An hour later, a servant came with a message. "Mr. Jassim is calling you to the porch." She wanted to refuse, but fear kept her from saying no. Forced, she stepped out of her room and walked to the porch. Beneath the stillness of night, the Khanzada mansion's courtyard seemed steeped in an unspoken dread. The moonlight spread faintly across the porch, casting eerie shadows of the trees on the ground. Here stood frozen, her steps trembling. Her hands shook. Her heartbeat pounded so loudly it felt as if her breath would stop any moment. She kept telling herself it would just be for a moment. But her fear only grew heavier. Suddenly, a deep, commanding voice broke the silence. "How are you, Begum? Is your room fine, or should I have it changed? If you have any problem, be sure to tell your husband. Every one of your troubles is mine to command." Startled, she spun around, and there stood Jassim. His stern gaze bore into her, his eyes filled with anger, defiance, and a strange unease. Here instantly lowered her head, clutching her scarf tightly. "The room is fine. You called me. Was there something you needed?" Her voice shook, betraying her fear. She couldn't figure out how to face him. Jassim pulled out a cigarette from his pocket, then put it back. Slowly he smiled, but it was a smile that chilled her to the bone. The wedding is done. A long drive is due, isn't it? Come on, get in the car. I need to talk to you. The ground seemed to slip from beneath Heer's feet. Trembling, she whispered, I'm not feeling well. Maybe another time. Fufo doesn't know either. Whatever you need to say, we can talk in the morning. Her face had gone pale with terror. Jassim's expression darkened instantly, his voice rising with authority. Did you hear me? Or should I lift you and throw you into the car? Get in, now. Don't dare show me any kind of drama. Heer's fear grew unbearable. Without another word, she rushed and sat inside the car. On the seat, she curled up tightly, as if trying to shrink into herself. No matter how much she tried to hide it, her trembling gave her away. He smiled openly at his success, and then sat beside her. Starting the car, Jassim cast a glance at her and said in a husky tone, Take off your scarf. We're husband and wife. Heer's hands trembled. In a shaky voice, she pleaded, No, please don't say that. Shame nearly killed her. It was already unbearable just sitting beside him, and now with such a demand, she felt her senses slipping away. Jassim's eyes turned red as he looked at her. I'll get leave after 3 months. Do you think I'll wait that long? We're going to my flat right now. I want my right, and I won't tolerate any kind of scene from you. Tears streamed from Heer's eyes. In a desperate tone, she said, What are you saying? I want to go to Fufo. This is wrong. His demand made her heart leap into her throat. Jassim slammed the brakes. The car jerked violently. Leaning toward her, he growled, If you try to get out of this car, I'll divorce you on the spot. Tell me, will you come with me or do you want a divorce? Heer's lips quivered. Her heart shattered into pieces, her breath growing faint. Images of her father's face and Fufo's words flashed before her eyes. But fear gripped her so tightly that she could not utter a single word. Jassim took her silence as consent. With a poisonous smile, he started the car again. The tires roared against the road. Heer shut her eyes, holding back her screams, her lips sealed in silence. Inside, a storm raged, even as the world outside seemed still. After a long drive, they arrived at the flat. In its silence, time seemed to stop. Jassim opened the door, brought Heer inside, and shut it firmly behind them. Her steps faltered. She stumbled against the wall. Tears filled her eyes as she broke down, sobbing, I won't share any relation with you. Our departure hasn't even taken place yet. For God's sake, don't do this to me. It's only been 4 days since my father's death. Her voice trembled with fear and pleading. Arms folded across his chest, Jassim looked at her with arrogance. If you can marry 4 days after your father's death, then what harm is there in consummating it? And who am I? Not a stranger, I'm your husband. My leave is only 3 months. I can't wait that long. Come to the room. Give me peace. Shaking her head in refusal, Heer cried in a trembling voice. No, I won't commit any wrongdoing. My Fufo trusts me so much. If she finds out, she'll hate me forever. Jassim's patience snapped. Heavy footsteps carried him toward her. Heer tried to step back, but the wall blocked her escape. He gripped her hand tightly. Do as I say. Don't provoke my anger. Stand up. His voice boomed like thunder. She struggled to free her hand, but his hold only tightened. Her eyes widened in terror as she wept. I told you not to touch me. This is wrong. Please let me go. Ignoring her words, he lifted her into his arms and carried her straight to the bedroom, placing her gently on the bed. Again, she tried to pull away, but this time his grip was firm. Looking into her eyes, he said, Don't force me to do this by strength. Sit quietly. If you make a sound, you'll see the worst of me. Let me do what I must. Through tears, she begged, Don't do this. Why are you treating me this way? Have mercy on me. Think of what I'm going through. But he ignored her pleas, drawing closer. Their breaths tangled. He gently brushed his lips against her cheek. She flinched, turning her face, but he held it firmly in his hands. For a moment, fear and pleading shone in her eyes, but then his lips pressed softly against hers, like the first bloom on a withered branch. She trembled violently, her voice choked. You're mine, he whispered. You always were and always will be. His arms tightened around her. She kept refusing, tears swimming in her eyes, but his stubbornness overpowered her. His closeness left her helpless. From her lips to her cheeks to the beat of her throat, his touch consumed her. She curled inward, but his hold never loosened. Time seemed frozen. In the silence of the room, only the sound of their breaths intertwined. She tried to hide her gaze in shame, but his touch tore away every barrier. At last, the moment came when no distance remained. The bond once tied in God's name now became a reality. The walls of that room stood witness as their souls and bodies merged into one. Before Dawn's call to prayer, he brought her back to the mansion. She wept the entire way, broken and devastated. But he cared for nothing, only his own satisfaction. By afternoon, sunlight streamed through the curtains into the room. The silence of the flat was broken only by the steady hum of the fan. She lay stretched out on the bed, her face pale, dark circles under her eyes. The torment and exhaustion of the night had broken her body. Just then the door opened softly. Mrs. Sakina entered, her face carrying a mother's tenderness, as though she could feel her niece's pain. She walked closer, gently placed her hand on Heer's forehead and gasped. "Oh, she's burning with fever, my precious child." Stroking her hair, she whispered, "What happened, my dear? You have a fever. Can you get up? I'll call the doctor." Like being jolted by an explosion, Heer flinched and sat up suddenly, panic in her trembling lips. "I didn't do anything. I swear I did nothing wrong." Mrs. Sakina stared at her in shock. "What are you saying? What happened? Is everything all right?" Terror shadowed Heer's face, as if a nightmare still haunted her even in daylight. Through sobs and hiccups, she said, I couldn't do anything. Then suddenly realizing her own words, she quickly shook her head in denial and said, "No, nothing happened. Nothing at all." "Why are you here, Aunt?" Mrs. Sakina gave her a deep look. She felt as if Heer was hiding something, but she changed the topic. "I came to tell you that Jassim has gone on duty. You should wake up and have breakfast." "All right, I'm having it prepared for you." It was already afternoon. Heer glanced at the clock. The hand pointed to 3:00. In a flash, last night's scene returned before her eyes. Jassim's face filled with anger, her attempts to scream, those tears, and then the moment when he had forced her into the room. Her breath grew uneven. She blushed in shame, then took a deep breath and tried to compose herself. She nodded and said in a low voice, "All right, I'll freshen up. I just feel very unwell." Mrs. Sakina looked at her face gently and said, "Yes, I can see that. You look very weak. Come, have something to eat. Then I'll give you your medicine. One shouldn't stay on an empty stomach with a fever." Saying this, she slowly left the room. As the door closed, silence once again filled the room. Heer collapsed back onto the bed. Her heartbeat was racing. Jassim's voice from the previous night echoed in her ears. "I am your husband. This is my right." She shivered. A chill ran over her body. Images of the night rose before her eyes one by one. Her resistance, her tears, and Yassim's harshness. She stared at her hands as if his grip still marked her skin. The ticking of the clock reminded her of the passing time. But for her, the night seemed never-ending. She was still trapped in that prison. Slowly, she buried her face in her hands and began to cry. "Aunt, if only you knew what I've been through," she whispered. But she knew she could never reveal this secret. Mrs. Sakina's trust and hopes would shatter. As soon as she closed her eyes, that scene replayed again. Her heart wanted to scream out, but no sound came from her throat. At last, she slowly got off the bed. Her steps were shaky. She looked at herself in the mirror, her face pale, eyes swollen from crying. With trembling breath, she tried to convince herself, "I will stay strong. I must endure." But when her gaze fell on the bed, that moment came rushing back. Her whole being revolted. The darkness of the night had cast such a shadow over her that even daylight could not bring her peace. Time moved slowly. Mrs. Sakina's love helped her endure to some extent, but for the past few days she had been feeling heavy. It had been a month and a half. For this reason, Mrs. Sakina had taken her to the hospital. But the news they received there destroyed what little peace she had left. It was noon. The curtains were drawn, filling the room with suffocating air. Heer sat leaning on the bed, her face pale, eyes swollen, and her heart felt as if crushed under a rock. Just a short while ago, the doctor had told her she was pregnant. Such news should have come as a blessing, but for her, it was nothing less than a death sentence. Mrs. Sakina entered the room, her eyes stern, lines of anger across her forehead. She came close to the bed, folded her arms, and in a cutting tone asked, "What is this?" Heer immediately folded her hands and burst into tears. The tears streamed down her cheeks. "Aunt, I swear to God, it's not my fault. I tried to stop Jasim so many times. On the wedding night, he took me to his flat. He said, I can't wait 3 months until my leave. I begged him again and again, but he wouldn't listen. Mrs. Sakina scoffed bitterly, pulled out a chair, and sat down in front of her. Who will believe you? Who will believe he forced you? In today's world, no one accepts such a story. What face will I show people? With her head bowed, Heer wept and said, Aunt, I never did this willingly. I swear to God I didn't know it would turn out this way. I felt so ashamed to tell you. How could I say he forced me? This isn't something decent to talk about. And now everything has happened that happens after marriage. Mrs. Sakina's tone grew harsher. Now you remember shame? When you went quietly to that flat at night, you felt no shame then. Do you realize? If your uncle finds out, he will kill you. He was already against this marriage. When he hears that you are pregnant without the proper wedding rites, do you think he'll believe you are innocent? Sobbing, Heer covered her eyes with her hands. Aunt, I never thought things would go this far. My life will be ruined. Mrs. Sakina rose from the chair with a deep sigh. You've put me in trouble too. All the blame will fall on you. The entire family will point fingers. They'll say the girl was immoral. How will I explain to them that this was not your choice? Heer cried desperately. Please forgive me. Please believe me. I am innocent. But Mrs. Sakina said sternly, This isn't about my belief. It's about what the world will say. This won't be settled easily. I will speak to Jasim and his father. Maybe they'll find a solution. Otherwise, you've dragged me into a pit of humiliation. Saying this, she stormed out of the room, slamming the door. The sound left a hollow silence behind. Heer collapsed on the bed, her tears soaking the pillow. Her heart screamed she was innocent, but her voice bounced back from the walls. Again and again, her mind replayed the night she was forced into the car and taken to the flat. Fear crushed her chest. What if her aunt told her uncle everything? What would happen then? The only sound left in the room was her sobbing. The weight on her being felt unbearable, as if even breathing had become a sin. Time crawled on. By the next afternoon, everything was on the verge of collapse. She had been summoned through a servant and now sat with her head bowed, like a criminal awaiting judgment. The lounge was silent. She sat on the edge of the sofa, twisting her fingers. Her eyes were swollen, her face drained of color. Across from her, Mrs. Sakina sat in deep thought, while in front of them Mr. Salim stood in fury. His face was red, his voice cutting through the silence. This is exactly why I warned you, Mrs. Sakina. I told you not to make that girl the daughter-in-law of our family. Who knows whose disgrace you've brought upon our son? I will never accept her. Throw her out at once. The words struck her heart like lightning. Her hands trembled even more. She couldn't speak, only lowered her gaze further. Immediately, Mrs. Sakina raised her voice. This is your own child's doing. Don't you dare point a finger at my niece. I didn't tell you the truth because I knew you would humiliate her like this. Don't you dare say another word. Mr. Salim exploded with rage, pointing at his wife. I'll divorce you too, and I'll have him divorce her as well. Who does she think she is? She will disgrace our family name. Heer trembled inside. Her breath grew heavy. Mrs. Sakina turned pale, about to speak, when suddenly a strong, clear voice rang out from the doorway. Enough, Baba! Don't you dare say a word against my mother and my wife. Mr. Salim froze where he stood. He looked up to see Jasim standing there, tall in his military uniform, pride in his stance but fury blazing in his eyes. Mr. Salim stammered, This can't be possible. Leave isn't granted before 3 months. Jasim stepped forward. Yes, Baba, I am here. And hear me clearly. I consummated my marriage the very night it happened. I took her to my flat. There is nothing wrong in it. She is my wife, not a stranger. The atmosphere in the lounge stilled. Mrs. Sakina breathed a sigh of relief. But Mr. Salim, still stubborn in his pride, snapped, You're lying. Jasim, this is all a fabrication. Yasim's eyes flashed. He raised his voice. I am not lying. If you don't believe me, have her medically examined. The truth will be proven, and you will know whose child she carries. He turned to his wife and said firmly, Go to the room. I'll come shortly. Trembling, she rose and walked toward the room, her steps unsteady, fear and exhaustion weighing on her. Yet Jasim's words gave her a small measure of comfort. Jasim remained before his father. Enough, Baba, this is it. Accept my decision. She is my wife, my honor, and I will protect her with my life. No matter how angry you are, remember, you cannot say a single word against her. The lounge fell silent. Mr. Salim's pride faltered for a moment. though stubbornness still burned in his eyes. On Mrs. Sakina's face, however, a faint light appeared, as if years of burden had suddenly lifted. After some more argument, Jassim finally turned and went toward his room. The ticking of the clock echoed in the quiet, heavy air, marking the passage of time. The soft breeze was making the curtains sway, and a faint light was scattered across the room. She sat timidly at the corner of the bed, both hands clasped tightly together, her eyes fixed on the floor. The creaking sound of the door opening made her heart pound loudly. Jassim walked in. There was weariness on his shoulders, but a strange sternness on his face. His footsteps seemed to pierce through the silence of the room. As soon as he entered, he spoke in a sarcastic tone. I never expected that such a big result would come from just one attempt. Hearing his words, she grew even more nervous, lowering her head further. Her lips began to tremble, and tears flowed involuntarily from her eyes. Crying, she said, "You have left me with nothing. Jassim, was this why you married me? Just so you could humiliate me in front of everyone?" Her voice was broken, as though with each word a piece of her heart was falling away. Jassim stared at her for a moment, then spoke meaningfully. "Who gave you the right to say anything to anyone? I stood there and gave the justification in front of everyone. What's the point of crying about it now?" She sobbed and said, "Do you even realize how embarrassed your justification made me? Everyone's eyes were on me, as though I had committed some great crime." Jassim's eyes hardened. In a heavy tone, he said, "I absolutely do not like my wife speaking back to me. After so many days, a husband comes home, and instead of peace, you throw such twisted words at me." Frightened, she replied, "I'm not feeling well. You don't need to think so negatively." Her heart was breaking. Her voice was trembling and tears streamed down her cheeks. Jassim sat down on the bed, moving closer to her. "I've already thought negatively," he said. "It surprises me that such a big result came from just one time being close. Who knows what might happen the next time?" She shivered and lowered her gaze even more. Her heartbeat grew louder. Her lips quivered, but her tongue felt tied. Suddenly, he moved closer and gently began to kiss away her tears. She drew a deep breath, knowing she could never fight against this man. 7 months later, steam rose from the teacup placed on the dining table, while the soft sunlight coming through the kitchen window bathed the room in a gentle glow. She sat leaning against a chair, her hand resting on her slightly heavy stomach. Mrs. Sakina sat across from her, looking at her with love and smiling warmly. With joy, Mrs. Sakina said, "Just a few more months, daughter, and then I'll have my grandchild in my arms." She lowered her head with a faint smile and replied softly, "Yes, Amma, just pray everything goes well." After a few moments of silence, her eyes filled with tears. Gathering courage, she asked, "Did Jassim say anything? When will he come? How long will his leave be?" Mrs. Sakina looked at her intently. Then with a teasing smile said, "Oh, my daughter, such love for your husband." Hearing this, she blushed, a shy smile forming on her lips. Mrs. Sakina held her hands and said warmly, "Stay happy always. Since childhood, I wished for you to become my daughter-in-law, but your father was afraid that Mr. Salim would not agree to this relationship. And now look at him. He's going crazy with happiness for this coming child. He's filled the entire room with toys and clothes, bringing something new every day." Hearing this, she smiled and lowered her head, a strange peace filling her heart, as though every sorrow was fading away. She was just about to reply when suddenly the kitchen door opened, and Jassim walked in, dressed in his military uniform, exactly as she had always imagined him. The moment her eyes fell on him, her heart began to race, as if it might burst out of her chest. "Assalamu alaikum," Jassim greeted with a smile. Joy sparkled in Mrs. Sakina's eyes. She quickly stood, kissed her son's forehead, and said, "May God protect you, my child." Jassim kissed her hands in return and said with a smile, "How are you, Amma?" Mrs. Sakina replied, "I'm fine. Now go ask your wife how she is. I'll go tell your father the good news that you're home." She hurried out, leaving the kitchen to just the two of them. Jassim slowly came closer, bent down and kissed her forehead. A mixture of shyness and happiness spread across her face. He gently placed his hand on her stomach and said with a smile, "How's my child?" Her eyes shimmered with tears, but a smile spread across her lips. In a soft tone, she said, "We're both fine. Just waiting for you." Jassim cupped her cheeks and said, "That's why I came back. My wife needs me. How could I stay away?" Overjoyed, she asked, "So, "Does that mean you'll be with me until delivery?" With a deep smile, Yasim answered, "Yes, I've come on leave. After all, my wife and my child have a right over me." Hearing this, tears of joy rolled down her cheeks as she leaned against her husband's chest. He held her tightly, as if promising never to leave her alone again. Outside, Mrs. Sakina and Mr. Salim were speaking happily, but inside the kitchen, a moment was being born that would become the most precious of their lives. A moment filled with love, peace, and the fragrance of a new journey. A journey that would bring sorrows too, but also the shelter of love, where every hardship would seem easier because Jasim's love and presence would always be there.